Thanks, Sanjay. Thank you, Laura, for an excellent panel and all the panelists as well. And now we'll have one of our other advisory board members, Sri, who's Director of Research at Gartner, introduce the next set of panels and panelists.
The next panel for the deploy theme is your organization ready for the cloud? We have a distinguished group of IT leaders as panelists, and we have an industry insider as a moderator. I would like to actually invite Michael Howard, the principal analyst and the co-founder at Infinitics, to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Sri. Panelists, come on up. So our panelists, we have 4 panelists today. First is Monica Hine, who's the Vice President of IBM Cloud Services, on topic. And so I'd like Monica to say hello briefly to the audience.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. And one of the reasons that I'm here is because I have a lot of experience within IBM with cloud, partly in the CIO office. And then I bridged over to more of the software side. So I'm heading up the area for providing a marketplace as well as cloud services. So I think I bring a unique perspective, having been in CIO as well as in the software development organizations. Nice to meet all of you.
Definitely good panelist. Thank you. And next, I'll introduce Adir Matu, who's the CIO at PMC Sierra.
Hello, everybody. I'm CIO at PMC Sierra. So PMC, actually, we make semiconductor solutions which are used in the cloud, both in the enterprise and in the hyperscale cloud data centers. So we have had a cloud program for a long time, and I'm very happy to give you some insights, how cloud services work and how frameworks are developed and so forth within an enterprise.
Cool, great, welcome. Our third panelist is Krish Mani, who's the CIO at Jeld-Wen.
Hi, I've been CIO for the past 15 years, so my viewpoint will be about adoption of cloud technologies within the enterprises and what's relevant to us and why we would get there. So good to be here.
Thank you, Krish. And our final panelist is Walter Kurd. He's the VP and CIO of Maxim Integrated Products. Walter?
Hi, I'm Walter Kurd. I'm the CIO for Maxim Integrated. We're a chip company here in Silicon Valley that makes a lot of analog sensors and things for the Internet of Things as well as smartphones. I've been there for 6 years. When I got there, most of the systems were 15 to 20 plus years old. And so I'll just talk a little bit about how we move some of the things to the cloud, what we can move, what we can't move, and how we did it.
Cool, thank you, Walter. So we're going to dive right in. The first question is, and on topic here for our topic of our panel, who's driving the cloud computing agenda? You know, which organization is it? Are there competing roles? What's the role of business versus IT, and maybe even the network people? And what's the governance framework? So that's one question, although this may take a little bit to answer. Who wants to start? Why don't we start from the...
Sure, I can start. So basically in PMC, what we have done is we call it Blueprint for Digital Enterprise. And as part of that whole blueprint, cloud is a part of it. As many of you know, cloud is now cloud is a computer. So it's just an important component of the whole blueprint. As part of the cloud strategy, basically it's driven from an IT standpoint. Business is definitely involved because IT can't do things on our own. And we do have frameworks, like I mentioned before. We have certain rules, which workloads, for example, make sense to move into the cloud. We have certain criteria based on which we decide which model to use for the cloud. For example, does it have to be private cloud, public cloud, those kind of things. So we have been actually doing cloud for a while now. In fact, I joined PMC 3 years ago, and actually more than 3 years ago. And one of the challenges, for example, we had an age-old data center. There was a need to expand it, and we did quite a bit of ROI work on that and realized it doesn't make sense to invest internally. So what we decided to do was basically move to a cloud service. It's a hosted cloud service in a city somewhere in East Canada. And since then, we have been doing quite a bit of cloud work. We are recently deploying our HRIS in cloud. We have B2B in cloud. But again, it's a collaborative effort between IT department and business side. Now, one of the things I would actually like to mention here is when we do TCO analysis, it's never straightforward, because from our perspective, our cloud strategies, we should have, you know, scalability, flexibility, and speed. Those are the kind of things that are very helpful when we do the cloud kind of a strategy. However, from a TCO perspective, it's not always cost-saving things. And one of the things I would like to actually challenge, if there are some vendors and entrepreneurs here, is to think that once you have cloud services up and running from a service provider standpoint, then I think in 4, 5, 6 years, when there is enough of economies of scale, then from an enterprise standpoint, we would like to see some costs going down, right? So usually I don't see that. So that's kind of a challenging piece. So hopefully that's helpful.
So, well, you said we made the decision to go to cloud, and then later on in your answer, you said it was business and IT together making the decision. Were there any struggles or different points of view there?
So it's many different situations happen, right? So in certain cases, some of the services lend itself to very IT-specific kind of service, right? So if you need a server for engineering, so usually IT takes the first initiative, and we kind of figure out where the server needs to be. Where it's a service which is highly business-focused, like it is in the supply chain or HRIS, then obviously you got to work with the business together. And there are also many instances where you don't even know, and somebody from the business side is already talking to the cloud service provider. I think, are they called shadow IT or something like that?
Next question.
Right. So things like that happen. But I think at the end of the day, what we have done is we have certain governance in place. We you know, as long as you have credibility in your IT department, you are delivering services, company and departments trust you, then working collaboratively with the business is not difficult, right? So
Great, thank you. Krish?
Yeah, in our case, though, cloud services, something is driven by the CIO's office primarily. However, the framework that has helped us really work with the business has been around setting a joint business to IT-based group that really decides how the best way to solve the business problem is, and then going after it. And so the framework has me, from the CIO perspective, a finance officer, as well as the chief operating officer with the legal person, who form a team really looking at how the best way to solve some of these problems are strategically, not at a tactical level. So, and it also lends to the governance framework and 3 levels. One is business drivers for the cloud-based technologies and how you adopt it. The second is around the technology aspects of how you can adopt cloud technology and how they integrate and what the value proposition is. And a third group that really decides the compliance aspects and security aspects of what the solution would be. So that's how we set up. So.
Great, thank you. Walter?
So how many people use Salesforce in here? How many people's companies use Salesforce? Well, we do too, and I think Mark Benioff really pioneered a lot of the cloud selling approach, which is basically to solve a very simple problem and then work as hard as you can to sell to people who have a big budget and don't know anything about IT. And he's been massively successful doing that. But the reality is, in a big company, that works sometimes slightly. You get some benefit out of that. But the reality is it's the end-to-end integration and the process changes that really drive the value. And that's the thing that really only IT can do. And so as we've sort of grown into all of this, we partner with all the businesses on all of these different initiatives. Obviously, we're Silicon Valley, like several of these people, so it's cloud first. But it's an education process that an organization has to go through to understand that IT has to manage the project, IT has to provide the process improvement, and especially the integration and making it work with all of your other systems and providing the reporting on those end-to-end basis has to come from IT. Now, we've had some learning in that, like our marketing department bought a lead management system. It was the right system, and they were going to go off, do it separately. Great. We talked to them. We were busy. They said, oh, okay, fine. That was, I think, 2 years ago in November. and it was supposed to be a 4-month project. And then about a year later, they're restarting that project because it didn't go anywhere. And then that's when we went back to them, stepped in, and said, hey, this is what the project needs, and now we're about to go live with it. And they actually know and appreciate it. But this is just a, sort of a organizational maturity, and getting people to collaborate with you just takes time.
So that's after the fact, actually, that you've chosen to use the cloud? Or how did you, when you made the initial decision to use the cloud, you said, well, we're all Silicon Valley, we go there. Did the business...
Well, because, you know, it was clear, obviously, several years ago, that's where everything was going. I mean, we partnered, this marketing was an example of where it, they sort of were going in a different direction, and now they're aligned. HR was working with us 4 years ago, and we actually owned an ERP HR system. Our current HR system was about 10, 15 years old then. And so what we did was we looked around. Workday was pretty obviously, even then, the future of HR. But because we had some leverage with our in-house ERP opportunity, we were able to get a really good deal. But I think it was educational for HR as well as us, because they were sort of in the marketing mindset of, hey, it's the cloud, we can do this by ourselves. They couldn't, and they didn't actually realize how much work it was going to be for them. When they were working, 18 hours a day, testing and configuring and planning.
Rather than using the application, which was their job.
But that's the reality of what it takes to do this. So, IT isn't that easy.
Monica?
So from an IBM perspective, being a super large company that we are, I'm actually surprised how comfortably we've settled into that division of labor and roles between IT and business. The CIO office, I think, has taken a very pragmatic, I would say, approach to the entire, how we live with our business users. And I'd like to answer the question in a couple ways. So first off, we don't look at it as just cloud. It's easier if you divide this up by the different types of cloud that the industry looks at, which is software as a service, platform as a service, and then, of course, infrastructure as a service. When you look at the SaaS side, we have people going and using the applications on the cloud. So like you said, Salesforce or Workday, you go there, you use it, and there the role of the CIO really isn't a whole lot. They are looking to partner with the end users. They're looking to be the advisor. And we've set up a center of excellence within the CIO office, which really is an advisor and also helps to evaluate technologies. We do a lot of reach out to our end users to really understand what are the requirements, what sort of things are you looking for in terms of applications, how can we validate them for you, and how can we make sure that we centralize on them for the rest of the company as well. So I think that approach is working pretty well. People are getting used to it. And we're finding that the CIO there is taking the back seat and just being an advisor and a mediator, and it's working pretty well. The main role being, make sure that we try to avoid shadow IT as much as possible. Let's be open and let's not push back as people try to use the software.
Well, IBM has shadow IT?
Surprisingly, yes. And then when you look at platform as a service, it changes completely. Now you see the CIO in the traditional role of being in the development organization, and now it's down to composable services. It's really not application development that was traditional, but it's more of how do you compose and use components. So the CIO is very involved. We have the DevOps concept. We're very closely knit, working with our development community and developing applications with them and being more agile and really trying to make sure that user requirements are met and it's a very short cycle, et cetera. So I think there you could say it is a very traditional role. And now when you look at infrastructure as a service for a large company like ours, it's interesting. We have a whole data center organization, been optimized for years. It continues to be optimized. And we don't really need to look at it more from somebody going out to Amazon, because we do it ourselves. For a smaller company, I think the challenge would be different, because there you're looking at the realm of people going out and creating provisioning environments on an Amazon, et cetera, and it becomes more challenging, but we don't see that within our company.
Well, what you highlighted is really that the bigger you are, the harder it is to do that because you own your own facilities, you already have the people,
Right.
you already have all of that. So the incremental cost versus going outside is a lot less.
Right.
But sometimes a development organization in some group doesn't think in that way, that we have it internally. Oh, I just have this little project to do and I'll just, boom, go to AWS, get a little, set up a little project, do some programming, whatever it takes. But then those kind of projects, once you do them, have a habit of growing is what I've observed.
Yeah.
Right, but that's the challenge of being in IT in a pretty sizable organization is you know that's going to happen, so you would like to get out ahead of it and have that, even that available for them. But it's really challenging to do the financial analysis on that and make it work. Like we're looking at, I've been trying for 2 years to justify moving our email to the cloud. It's, you know, it's a lot of money per user when you add up all the users versus, you know, upgrading internally, et cetera. But we're finally going to do it. Even though we want to do it strategically, the numbers still have to work. And that's really the challenge of a big company.
And the cloud adoption impediments are around how strong your internal IT and capabilities and assets are as well. To Monica's point, if you have all of that internally, then adoption to the cloud becomes a much tougher journey because you
Right.
already have invested those kind of monies internally in some way, but not to a Windows and doors manufacturer like mine. We would love the cloud.
And we
Yeah.
have sandboxes that people are used to using, you know, for developers, and so it's not so much of a problem for us.
Well, you've educated your users so that they know they can come to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Any more comment Ed here?
No, I think we are talking about shadow IT now. So
Yeah, let's go on to that. Yeah, good. So what are the challenges with shadow IT?
because that's
Bring
where
your
it
own
is-
cloud.
That's where it is headed, right? So yeah, I have actually mixed feelings about shadow IT, right? So first of all, I don't agree with the definition of shadow IT because shadow usually follows you, whereas these groups, they don't follow you, right? So the name itself is wrong, but I think the idea is probably that some non-standard things they do and stuff like that. Now, with that said, it's not a bad thing to have shadow IT because that shows you the mirror that what kind of things that IT should be doing and you're not doing. So you better do it for the betterment of your company. So in that sense, it's okay. But I think at the same time, there are departments that I have seen, and it has actually happened to us in my current company and in the previous company also, that when IT starts delivering, those shadows disappear, right? So-called shadows. And actually, how to make it work and how to get around these kind of issues, there are many ways of doing it, governance and frameworks and those kind of things being one. The other actually, we found it very interesting last 4 or 5 months was, I guess there are now tools available in the market that you can run and you can see what's going on between your company and the cloud services, and then who, depending on your infrastructure setup and firewalls and those kind of things, you can actually see which groups and which users are using which services in the cloud. You have like 300 users using X service, 500 users using Y service. So obviously there is a reason why they are using it, and maybe your corporate IT is not providing it. So you can get various kinds of insights, and then think about it. Users need it, and we have to get around it, right?
So you're shadowing them.
We are shadowing the shady groups.
Well, what it here is talking about is really the fragmentation of IT. So over the last couple of years, or last 20 years, everything's been sort of consolidating, and right? And corporate IT likes that because it's simple, and you can control it. Everything's going into 1 or 2 ERP systems. You got one tool for here or there. They're all inside, and now it's going completely the other way. And the actual benefit of that, like we've got someone in our sales operations group, very creative guy. He basically set up an app store, but he worked with us. But he's really driving our mobilization of the Salesforce, which is great because they love it, we love it. But it's got to be a partnership, and that's really the key for IT is to get to engage at a high level with all the executives, so you have that partnership and trust. Otherwise, they will go all the way around you.
Yep.
That's why I kind of prefer the term bring your own cloud as opposed to shadow IT, because it's the same as BYOD. I mean, it's the same thing. All of a sudden there's new activities going on in your organization that you did not approve that are reaching outside. Same
I mean,
principle.
most people just want to get their job done, so they find the tools that they need. And most of the tools they get ideas from are from their friends at other companies or something like that. So it's actually sort of a good innovation hub for if you tap into it. But that's not traditionally the way IT operated. Traditionally, and especially in a big company, you sort of create this walled-off garden, and that's crumbling. Now everything's fragmenting.
Yeah, to Walter's point, though, from a shadow IT, I don't see it as negative, right? Anything that is strategic to the organization, like I said, you have to have a strategy and a structure around which you make decisions on strategic initiatives. And at the same time, you have to have a mechanism to understand what's going on, especially a global organization like mine, what's going on in different regions and areas. That may be something that we can adopt. By providing a structure and encouraging that, then you are really fostering that atmosphere of getting the right ideas out and then using that to permeate across the organization. So I see shadow IT or shadow business as a weapon, as long as you can somehow corral the organization when it comes to strategic initiatives.
I'm surprised at the perspective you guys are giving, because I have a different perspective. To me, this is like looking for the silver lining, and I agree, you can find the positive in it, but there are so many negatives and problems that it causes for an IT organization, no matter which way you slice it. To begin with, the IT spend is getting higher and higher. You have these silos of spend in different organizations,
That's
and
good for
you lose control.
That's good for IBM.
Assuming we're selling to you guys. So, Gartner says by next year we'll have 35% of the spend outside of IT, and that's only going to continue to grow. How do you manage that sprawl? Secondly, I think everybody talks about security, but beyond just data security, I think there's a huge issue with security and data itself, because you have people buying with their own credit card. Costs are so small on the cloud. Everybody's buying with a credit card. Let's say, God forbid, you have an employee who leaves the company. Who owns that data? Who owns that application after that? And you have this problem. You have data silos coming up. We see that all the time. People wanting to take this little application, even if it's Salesforce, and they create something where they think they're doing a great job of expediting things. But in a company of our size, where you have customers that may be in common between organizations, it's impossible to go and collate that data. You can't get a single view of your customer. All of that metadata is lost. So those are just small examples. There's a ton of problems that come with this. So that's my viewpoint from our company's perspective.
Yeah, well, generally, the cloud services that they can buy on their credit card are actually the scary ones, which are the Dropboxes, et cetera. And the real challenge there, they can't really. We already have services. In a big company, it's very difficult to buy a service for a whole bunch of people on a credit card, but in smaller companies, it's obviously easier. But the challenge with all these data sharing services is that, as far as we've determined, no one solved the problem of tracking the data wherever it goes. Mm-hmm. And that's really highlighting this, right? All the services are ahead of the organizations, and they're ahead of the security side of it. And that's the part that I think there's a huge opportunity in, and we've talked to several companies on how to do that more seamlessly and less disruptively. Because otherwise, this basically almost ruined the recording industry. Mm-hmm. They couldn't control their bits. And once their bits were out there, everybody had them, and no one wanted to pay for them. And this is, it's IP in a company, but it's the same thing.
That's why I see it as a negative.
But you can't stop it.
Well, I think it also depends on the maturity of the particular technologies and ecosystem and so forth, right? I think, 40 years ago, I'm not that old, by the way, but maybe 30 years ago, there used to be no concept of IT as a department, right? So people used to have their own ITs, people used to bring their own applications and systems and so forth. So I believe what's happening is with these cloud technologies, mobile, consumer, and all these things, let's face it, these are still evolving, right? So they're not matured yet. And corporate IT departments, they're not in a position at this point in time, at least from what I know, is where they can have these in a consume these services in a mature fashion. So what happens is, you have this mayhem or chaos in many companies where employees are going left and right with no governance and stuff. But my feeling is, as this whole industry matures, then things will calm down. I think you'll have lesser these kind of issues that we are talking about, right?
Cool. Any other comments about this, or I'm going to ask the final question?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is a conference in name at least, and I think in fact a lot of entrepreneurs. So as a CIO, what can entrepreneurs do for you, and how might they do that? How might they approach you? Or how should they not approach you as well? Adir?
Okay. So I'll probably speak for myself, right? So usually what happens is I don't take any phone calls, I don't read any emails, because it's lots of them, right? We get like 500 to 1,000 emails and tens, and so it's not very time efficient for us to go through each and every and listen. So I can understand it's very difficult for entrepreneurs and startups to get hold of, but at the same time, I would encourage and say, be persistent, because you never know. Particularly for me, even if I'm not responding, for example, I'm still scanning and reading and keeping an eye, and interesting ones, trust me, I keep them in my archive folder. And if a problem happens in future, I usually tend to go back and read, and once in a while, call back also. So that's one. Second one is, I can give second one too? Yeah. Second one is, particularly in the Bay Area here, right? So there are a lot of VC firms, and they have their own funding, and they have their own startups. So the kind of trend that I've seen these days is, because like I mentioned, there are a lot of new technologies, evolving technologies, new coming up. So from a CIO or from an IT perspective, one of the mediums for us is basically we go and see what's going on in their area and visit them and talk to some of them. So that can be one medium, I guess, where it's part of the whole networking, where if you are in that ecosystem, or there are events like this, TiEcon, where we come and meet some of the CIOs. So that's another area.
Good.
Okay.
Chris?
Well, you're right. Getting to the CIO's office when you're getting 500 emails is very difficult. And even more difficult is, how do you then catch the attention? And the only way you can do that is to somehow understand either the problem that the CIO has, or the problems, or figure out how your product or service is going to be highly relevant. And so when writing emails, I would jump to that first point right away, saying, here's the product or service, here's how I believe it will solve your problem. If the problem doesn't exist, I won't respond. If the problem exists, I will, right? So when we get so many emails, to catch the attention of the CIO within the first 4 lines is very important. We don't want to know who you are. We don't want to know where you're coming from. We don't want to say what to call you back. Problem, solution, would you be interested? That's the best way to get. But if you can network somehow, and there are a lot of CIO forums and a lot of areas where you can get to CIOs or their staff. And if you can, the trick is for you guys or girls to come to the problem that the CIOs have and the company has. And then how do you get there? That's the challenge. Once you get there, then you have the attention. So
It has to be a specific problem, too. You see
That's
an
correct.
email headline, I'll solve your cloud problems.
yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, the jargons don't matter.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think, at least in Silicon Valley, if you're an entrepreneur and you're funded by one of the venture capitalists, those are the guys that can get you introduced, et cetera. I mean, we partner with Andreessen and Greylock and a few other ones to review their potential, their startups and what they do, and see how they work with us. But I think the other thing is obviously conferences like this, and there's a lot of CIO conferences. But I do have some advice. So when you go there, know what you're talking about. So there was one that I was at, and I was talking to the guy about what his company did, and he's like, oh yeah, we do this, and we're big into big data. So I looked right at him, I said, what is that? And he starts stammering, because he didn't really know. He just knew it was a buzzword that everybody was using. So yeah, if you know what you're talking about and your products add value, you will get to the right spot.
And obviously that person had not been vetted by a VC. 'Cause
No.
that guy doesn't get past the door. Monica?
So I normally delete all my email. I know most people do. Whenever I see it's an external email, but one did get my attention the other day. It said in the subject, donuts or croissants. If you give us a 15-minute meeting, we'll come with this and bring you coffee or whatever it was. But that aside, I think the most important is if you can solve a problem like everyone else has said, and you are a partner to one of the vendors that I'm already using, and they recommend you, boy, you get in the door real fast. So for some of our application work that we're doing, we have SAP extensively used, and a lot of the vendors that have come in to our CIO applications are people that are either certified with them or they've recommended, because it is a damn pain for us to integrate and to test and to make sure something works. So a lot of times as we're doing a deployment, we look at the vendors that we already have and say, how can we solve this other piece of the problem that you don't? And they'll recommend somebody that is a partner with them. So that probably is something that would really get your foot in the door if you could partner with some of the large ones like SAPs or of the world out there. So I think that
So
really
just for
works
the rest of you
us.
guys, so has it ever worked where they send you part of something and say, hey, if you have a meeting, you get the other part?
No.
It's never worked with me either,
No.
but keep trying because it's fun.
Actually, the other thing is because a lot of times, you read an email, you find something interesting, and you don't want to call the person back, but you want to go to their website and see what's going on. So, and ensure your websites, if you're trying to sell, have as much information as possible. And now I used to be on the consulting side, so I know kind of issues there are. So do, I think like it's mentioned, do research, right? Just don't be mass mailing, because result of mass mailing is not going to be very good. So do some research, right? So to give you an example, if somebody tells me, oh, Walter using this service, and take a look at it, I'll be very interested. So look at which company you're trying to contact, who their competitors are, who their peers are, what kind of challenges that industry has, and what are some of the unsolved issues they have, and if you have a solution, then send information.
Do your homework.
Do your homework.
Great. Well, that ends our time. Thank you very much, panel. We'll give the panel a hand.